अभी हमने आने से पहले भी आपको आते साथ ही एक pitches करवा दी हैं अपने मेरे एक दोस्तों से. We've been pitching it to me. I don't know why they think I would have the money for this. So I was like, if at some point I can connect somebody to somebody and they can make something bigger than what they're currently doing, that could work. But you saw the pitches, and I love how you can be not offensive and break down that the business model is not right. So how often do you have to do that? Do you have to like tell people straight to their face, like, you didn't think about this, think about that? Or what is the aim? Is the aim to shoot someone down? Is the aim to make them improve their pitch next time? How does the relationship form? What's the process like?
Yeah, I love that question, right? Because on the one hand, my entire kind of like job description and the daily work that I have to do is to listen to pitches and figure out which one is interesting and which one isn't. But एक वो element of hope होते हैं with every entrepreneur when they're approaching an investor, right? Like, because everyone thinks that their idea is good, and most of the ideas are actually good. But what we also have to solve for is whether it's suited to our type of investment. Or venture investment pretty specific trajectory follow करती है, and most businesses actually don't fit that. But at the same time, you're wanting to be polite, and आज तो obviously it was a nice comfortable setting, but imagine like a conference in which I'm showing up to speak. Just getting to the hall, you're going to have maybe 10, 20, 50 individuals out there that are wanting to get just a few minutes of your time, and a lot of those are not worth spending too much time on. Not because those people don't believe in themselves or they can't pull it off, but it's just that the fit isn't there. So striking that balance between giving them useful advice versus also finding good opportunities that we can pursue versus just being rude and not giving them time or saying something that just discourages them. That's a fine balance. But
I mean, I saw a TV show where you were listening to other people's pitches, and you were being pretty sweet, and breaking down what the flaws, or critically kind of analyzing what their pitch was. But piche music like a dush, as if you said something that just destroyed their soul. I was like, yaar, ye kya kar rahe hain?
Would dramatize bhi karna hota, and matlab Shark Tank, the US show, this show was trying to model off of that. आपके personas भी build हो जाते हैं, right? And sometimes आपको और लोगों के shoulders चाहिए होते हैं जिनके ऊपर से आप बंदूक चला रहे होते हैं. But ultimately, the objective is to find those brilliant ideas that are being come up with by entrepreneurs that are daring, that have the grit, the perseverance to go out there and make something new. Entrepreneurship is really like the creation and extraction of economic value. And the way we describe it in our space is this form of entrepreneurship normally requires taking on more risk than is associated with starting a conventional business. आपकी एक जगह में bakeries चल रही हैं और आप एक और bakery खोल रहे हो, उसके अंदर आपको थोड़े से risk वगैरह associated पता होते हैं. पर आपकी outsized returns और value creation कब होगी? जब आप किसी चीज़ को disrupt कर रहे हो. So you have a traditional industry, और उसमें अभी आप technology को leverage करके you can come up with a scalable model that doesn't require brick and mortar setup, that doesn't require hiring people, thousands of people on your payroll, but instead you can connect people together to create opportunities for economic value generation. और उसके अंदर फिर आपके जो risks होते हैं वो थोड़े से ज़रा different nature के होते हैं. So our job primarily is to assess those risks. And what makes it a little bit more difficult is कि आप एक बहुत early stage के ऊपर assessment कर रहे होते हो कि whether this thing is going to work in 5, 7, 10 years time, and then at that point become this massive company which is going to generate financial returns for us. A lot of times we're going to get it wrong. That's the nature of the beast. But the idea is really that if you don't swing, you're going to for sure miss, right? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah.
So we still have to take shots, but we also have limited capital. We can't be, for example, just मैंने पहले बोला,
small jabs, but
1700 companies को अगर हमने evaluate किया है, we couldn't have given money to all 1700.
Yeah.
Right? So how are we determining कि जी किसके अंदर कितना potential है? And for the most part, it comes down to the individual. So even though we say business model, आपके market का size, आपकी उसके against traction कैसी है, the economic reality of the country in which you're trying to create such an opportunity, वो सारी चीज़ें pale in comparison to the potential of the entrepreneur. Because you can give a great company to a mediocre entrepreneur and he's going to run it into the ground. And you can give a mediocre idea to a great entrepreneur and that entrepreneur is going to pivot around, try new things, experiment, and eventually make it work because their hunger, their drive is what is going to make these things all possible. हमारा मसला सिर्फ ये हो जाता है कि because we're not the ones actually building these companies. We're just a support act in that process. And it's a crucial support act because otherwise those risks won't be taken. तो हमें वो देखना होता है कि जी कौन सा इंडिविजुअल ऐसा है कि जिनको बैक किया जा सकता है और उनको अक्सर we also say to them why not try this different model around the same space. In some cases when they're adamant or trying what they want to try, my own objective is to keep as good terms with that entrepreneur as possible because the next time when they're coming out and raising, hopefully we are one of the first ones that they approach for that funding. That doesn't mean कि जी आप किसी को back कर रहे हैं without believing that they can make something out of it just to buy that opportunity for a second time. So वो वाला थोड़ा सा ये balance हमेशा करना पड़ता है और ये daily का, that's the daily job.
And did you learn this over years? Also, I wanted to get into, like I have this breakdown, Isan जरा लगाते हैं वो. So I have this breakdown of Sarmayacar and what, of course, I should give shout out to profitpakistantoday.com.pk. I guess they're seeing it on screen right now. But there's this whole breakdown of how much money, where it went, where this has probably changed over time. Your portfolio is different now.
Yeah.
So you got the 200,000 to Petari?
Yeah, that was like the first deal that we did when we started Sarmayacar. अब idea there was interesting kind of क्योंकि एक और चीज़ जो हमें करनी पड़ती है as VCs is we need to do some pattern recognition and see कि ये इसी type की opportunity in an economy similar to ours or in a space similar to what that company is operating in, ये और कहाँ हुआ है, उनकी क्या trajectory थी. So back in the day when I was making the transition from investment banker to the buy side as an investment professional when I was at GIC, वहाँ पे मैंने 2 colleagues के साथ मिलके एक बहुत छोटा सा stake Spotify में खरीदा था with a couple of my colleagues. अब उस वक्त क्या thesis था कि जी consumption of music was moving to digital sources. Within digital sources, it was moving to streaming rather than outright ownership. उसके बैकग्राउंड अगर वो एप्पल iTunes से आप वो शुरू करें,
Spotify,
हाँ उसमें Spotify की ट्रांजिशन क्या हुई थी कि डिजिटली थे पर वो rather than owning one album or one song, why don't you subscribe to a service and then you have all of those songs available whenever you want them. So वो एक थोड़ा सा एक knowledge था. Obviously that investment worked out for me as well, the Spotify one. But that also prompted when I started looking at the Pakistani opportunities कि यहाँ पे उस टाइप की venture backable, scalable opportunities किस तरह की हैं. उस वक्त काफ़ी एक मार्केट के अंदर वो पटारी के राउंड एक काफ़ी हाइप सी बनी हुई थी एंड लाइक यू नो दे हैड अ ग्रेट प्रोडक्ट एंड इट वाज अ प्रोपोजिशन व्हिच मेड सेंस क्योंकि पाकिस्तान के अंदर म्यूजिक हैज़ प्लेड अ क्रिटिकल रोल. अभी भी 50 साल से हम देखते आ रहे हैं और अभी भी ये होता है आपके 2-3 चीज़ों के अराउंड यहाँ पे एड्स भी बनते हैं और अपील होती है. एक आपके खाने के राउंड होती है, एक आपकी क्रिकेट के राउंड होती है और एक आपके म्यूज़िक के राउंड होते हैं. अभी भी पेप्सी जब अपने एड्स बनाते हैं ना तो वो इन्हीं चीज़ों को हाईलाइट कर रहे होते हैं. इवन अगर आप लोक विरसा म्यूज़ियम में जाएं इस्लामाबाद में और वहाँ पे यू गो थ्रू आवर हिस्ट्री इवन बिफोर इंडिपेंडेंस, आपको हर फेज़ और हर स्टेज के टाइम के अराउंड ना म्यूज़िकल इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स नज़र आएंगे. आपको एक वो द रिच हिस्ट्री दैट वी हैव अराउंड म्यूज़िक will become quite evident and we still resonate to that. India में एक बहुत बड़ी massive market है around Pakistani underground music. आपका यहाँ पे कोक स्टूडियो की अपील दुनिया में कहाँ नहीं है.
Pusuri was the biggest song in the world.
And I heard it in a German club.
I heard it in Baku.
There you go. Right? So वो वाली एक चीज़ अपील थी उस वक्त and that resonated with us even though it wasn't being monetized at that time. As it turns out that specific business model that we had in mind didn't really pan out because subscribers आपके पाकिस्तान में सिर्फ पाकिस्तान कंटेंट के लाइक सिर्फ पाकिस्तानी म्यूज़िक को पे करने के कंज्यूम करने के लिए भी नहीं देने के लिए रेडी. इंटरेस्टिंग स्टैट इसके अंदर मैं आपको ये बताता हूँ कि देयर वाज अ टाइम व्हेन 38 मिलियन पीपल इन पाकिस्तान वर सब्सक्राइबर्स टू रिंग बैक टोन्स एंड दे वर पेइंग ऑन एवरेज अ लिटिल लेस देन 20 रुपीज़ अ मंथ. अब वो पिंच क्यों नहीं करता था उन्हें? क्योंकि आपका डेली का 80 पैसा 85 पैसा आपका कटता था. आप उन्हें भी कहना कि महीने का पूरा 20 रुपये हम एक ही वक्त में काटेंगे. दे माइट ऑप्ट आउट ऑफ इट. इंटरेस्टिंग चीज़ इसमें ये है कि वो रिंग बैक टोन आप खुद भी नहीं सुनते. It's people who are calling you. But you want to be seen as someone who either appreciates music or has a certain
taste, your identity gets tied to it.
तो वो आपके identity के साथ वो एक part बन जाता है. So that has been a part of Pakistan from the beginning, and that's not going to change. So we look for business models around these types of mega thesis, for example, जहाँ पे आपके एक वो trend है जो कि move कर रहा होता है. Maybe if I can take this opportunity to also explain why, like, you know, Pakistan is interesting around this. आपकी हमारी एक बहुत काफ़ी large population है, which is very young. हमारे 64% of our population is less than 30 years old. Our median age is 21.3 something years, so meaning almost 50% is less than that as well. And we're a very consumption-oriented economy. More than 85% of our GDP is actually linked to consumption. वो हमारे जो consumption patterns हैं, वो digital first avenues को move कर रहे हैं. और ये जो young population है, इनके पास तो अभी तक disposable income ही नहीं आई to really start spending on that consumption. But the same way, an elderly father in our country sends his son to a specific pharmacy वाला कि जी मैं वो 35 साल से उसी बंदे से मैं दवाई ले रहा हूँ, आपने जाके वहाँ से जाके लेनी है. उनके लिए वो switch करना is as difficult as it will be for one of the youth in our country to actually resort to that as the first means rather than saying, can I check online? And can that thing be ordered online? And can I have a digital first avenue or user interface that is different to walking into a store, having that different experience? और ये सारा आपका trend अभी आगे आके play करेगा. At an overarching level, our economy is only about 1% penetrated e-commerce versus traditional retail. ये इंडिया में तकरीबन 6% के करीब है, and the US is like, you know, mid-20s plus. अब आपकी जब हम ओवरऑल ग्रोथ रेट देखते हैं या अपॉर्चुनिटी देखते हैं कि कहाँ पे आपको फर्दर ग्रोथ आएगी, वो आप 1% से 2% पे जा रहे हैं, तो इमेजिन द इंटायर ई कॉमर्स बेस इन द कंट्री इज डबलिंग एंड द GDP is not doubling necessarily in that same period. So that opportunity to play on that trend is only starting now. And that's really the thesis behind our venture fund and other like venture funds that have come up in the country as well. Because in order to experiment around those new business models, you need risk capital. Because it carries higher amount of risk. उस higher amount of risk को compensate करने के लिए आपको outsized returns चाहिए होते हैं. So meaning even if 1, 2, 3 of your backed companies work out, they really need to work out. So they need to become hundreds of millions of dollars worth to pay for all the other bets that didn't pan out. और वो जब आप एक traditional lens से देखते हैं, तो वो यहाँ पे आपका पहले नहीं investment हो रही थी. आपकी एक traditional पाकिस्तान के अंदर investment की notion क्या थी? आपने real estate खरीद ली. अगर रियल एस्टेट के ऊपर अगर आपने कोई बनी हुई चीज़ खरीद ली तो उसके ऊपर भी वो क्या कहते हैं कि जी जो घर बना हुआ है उसकी कीमत नहीं मिलती, आपको ज़मीन की मिलेगी. हमने फिर थोड़ा सा और एडवांस किया तो हम स्टॉक्स के अंदर थोड़ा सा इन्वेस्टमेंट शुरू होगी, म्यूचुअल फंड्स के अंदर होगी. पर इवन द पीपल who held a lot of money or wealth in the country, they were not comfortable with taking the kind of risk that is associated with the venture asset class. और उस चीज़ ने opportunity बनाई थी for people like myself to try to bring together some of that risk capital and provide the governance and the structuring and like, you know, the support that is needed around this, ताकि आप एक blue chip manner में आप ये एक portfolio बना सकें, because each investment is too risky to just be done on its own. So you need a portfolio of these. और उसके अंदर फिर I try to identify which space is interesting, which space has some margin that you could potentially capture if you come up with like, you know, scalable opportunity leveraging technology. अब इसका example क्या होता है कि जी आपके एक streaming service है, let's continue with that example. उसके अंदर आपके 1000 आपके subscribers हैं. For getting 2000 subscribers or even 10,000 subscribers, you do not need to create a new platform. You do not need to do much other than getting like, you know, आपके cloud के अंदर आपको ज़्यादा space चाहिए and whatnot. आपका अगर 20 beds का hospital है, to get 40 people in that hospital bed at the same time, you literally need to create
more space.
More space. You need to create 20 more beds. Right? तो यहाँ पे हम वो scalability का difference आ जाता है. And so what we do is we back these types of scalable opportunities, जहाँ पे आपके over time you can add more users without having to increase your employee base by that much, without having to recreate what you have already created or double in capacity that thing that you have created. Even if you need more like cloud storage space or whatever it is, aapne ko servers zyada chahiye and whatnot, that's still a portion of that overall thing that you need to increase, but the rest of it stays the same.
Yeah, I mean, if we can go to Ihsan, the screen again, I found Petari to be really cool because it had an interesting like image. So Shazil, who did the production design and the artwork, a lot of the artwork, ek to uska Shazil ka kaam was just like look at that stuff.
Petari
Unbelievable. She is so super talented, man. And like I remember this is a concert I performed on as well.
Very nice.
Petari Aslees, I think volume 1 mein main bhi kahin I performed a few songs. But all of this artwork and the app looks so cool. So when a lot of people who are Ihsan, you can come back to my face now. Earlier I subscribed and the payout thing was also a part of it, that the artist is going to get money. So for the artist to upload, incentive bhi tha wahan pe zyada. There used to be apniisp.com jahan pe free gaane hum pehle download karte the. All they did was put apniisp.com right at the end of it.
Exactly.
So when you looked at this Petari pitch and you're saying it's more the people, the entrepreneur and his background, as opposed to idea kya hai? Because idea seems like Petari is the same as Spotify, right? It wasn't a subscription-based model though. It was
At that time, it wasn't a subscription-based model, but that was part of the plan.
But what did you see? Like, so that people who are going to pitch to you get an idea of कि मैंने क्या कर लेना है. Abhi from these pitches, I also realized that they need to have proven their entrepreneurial skills before coming to you, because this is the bigger step as opposed to the small step where you set the company up. Is that always the case, or do you fund someone from scratch as well, or is it always like I need like a background history?
Yeah, I think it's very rare that we would do something where nothing has been done on actually executing against the thing, right? I think ideas are great, but they're only acting as multipliers for whatever the execution capacity is going to be. And then we have to take a call कि यार वो execution capacity कैसी है. अब monetizing an idea or a product might come later, but the product needs to be there. आप बना क्या रहे हो और आप उसको कितना अच्छा बना सकते हो. तो जो Petari के अंदर हमें नजर आया था कि उनका product at that time was good, it was well made. Their thesis around aggregating as much Pakistani audio content in one place made sense, because उस वक्त YouTube के ऊपर आपकी एक एक करके आप selection करनी पड़ती थी. Spotify के ऊपर इतना ज़्यादा तब पाकिस्तानी content था नहीं. At that time, actually, they hadn't even launched in Pakistan. So, and most of the founders were engineers. So they had just built the product, and some people that they had, actually, abhi aapne shayad football ki commentary mein Emir Naqvi ko aapne dekha hoga. So he had also a good sense, like, you know, or like, you know, understood the pulse of the music pulse of the nation. Ki ji youth kya sun rahi hai, kya nahi. And they were getting that content from artists, because artists didn't really have a platform where they could potentially monetize and benefit more than what they were doing through these traditional labels. So that was the hypothesis at the beginning. Journey ke andar, ab jo ek cheez jiske upar Petari also fell short was really being able to translate that into true economics for artists. And why was that? Was because they weren't able to monetize their service as much. Unke paise bane the sirf कैंपेन्स करने के लिए फॉर बिग ब्रांड्स, और उनके लिए क्या होता था कि जी हमने नसीबो लाल और किसी और के साथ हमने एक पूरा कॉम्बिनेशन करना है. आप नसीबो को जाके आप पे करेंगे, आप उनसे वो गाना रिकॉर्ड करवाएंगे, फिर आप वीडियोग्राफर्स इकट्ठे करेंगे, आप उसकी पूरी डिज़ाइन करेंगे एंड सो ऑन.
ओह या, वो मेरे स्टूडियो में नसीबो लाल वाला हुआ था. तलाल कुरैशी वाज प्रोड्यूसिंग इट.
Exactly
in Karachi. I remember that.
So but those are like specific like campaigns and projects which are different to what the streaming hypothesis was, right? Like, you know, the thesis around streaming was that you have this content in one place, people subscribe to that, they pay a monthly fee, and then depending on how many streams artist A has had relative to the overall streams, they get paid out that pro rata to all the other artists. अब वो issue यहाँ कहाँ पे हुआ, जहाँ पे थोड़ी सी controversy भी बनी कि जी artists were thinking that they are not being paid enough by Petari. असल में वो proportion was just low because the overall monetization by Petari was very low. And so you cannot be paying out of your pocket for artist 1 versus artist 2 because then everyone feels that that is not a fair way of doing it. And the way Spotify, for example, does it is by adjusting how much of their total money they're going to pay out to artists, but the payouts are always in proportion to the streams because that's data telling you, that's basically consumers telling you who they want to listen to more than others. So that was the model. It unfortunately didn't pan out in that same way, but I think the strength of the product itself kept the company going. Abhi bhi, if you go, you still have Petari around. In fact, there might be something which is somewhat of an exciting development coming in the next few months because our belief after that experiment was that Petari is probably better housed in under bigger umbrella. Where people might have like a broader value proposition जिसके against वो शायद pay करने के लिए भी ready हों और वो हमारे पहले वाले experimentation से नहीं conclusion निकल सकी. So now we're trying to have like find it a different house under which it can reside.
Well, when that harassment controversy happened, was there a downfall in the amount of consumers, or was it just like न्यूज़ ही खाली हुई थी? उससे कोई फर्क पड़ा था कि यूजर्स कम हो?
अच्छा, सो ऑन द यूजर साइड ना व्हाट्स इंटरेस्टिंग इज लाइक आपकी वो जितनी कंट्रोवर्सी होती है ना उतना लोग ज्यादा आ जाते हैं राइट,
बेनिफिशियल.
पर मसला ये होता है कि लोग क्यों आ रहे हैं, वो कंटेंट के लिए आ रहे हैं. एंड सम आर्टिस्ट ऑब्वियसली टुक एक्सेप्शन टू लाइक Petari's kind of like with that controversy coming around, and so some content got removed at that time. User numbers तो उस वक्त हमें स्पाइक किए. But overall, ultimately, if you want to keep these users on your platform and you need to charge them for it, you need to continuously have like new content coming on, जो कि आज तक अभी तक किसी ना किसी वजह से Petari को मिलता जा रहा है और free content मिलता जा रहा है. Anyone who's up and coming wants their music and content to be everywhere. Irrespective initially of how much they can monetize from one channel versus the other. So for some reason, Petari still gets new music.
I mean, I haven't uploaded mine there in a while. Not that I've made much in the past 5 years, but I have a few songs. But like what your distribution mediums that we use, like there's TuneCore, there's CD Baby, there's one place you go to and they put it on everything. But Petari is not there. Did you guys think of putting it up there in that distribution medium?
No, so we don't have any restrictions on anyone putting content on. It's only around the quality of the recording effectively. Because we can't be arbitrary. We can't say that आपका music अच्छा नहीं है तो हम नहीं डालेंगे अपने platform पे, आपका अच्छा है हम नहीं डालेंगे. The reason why some of these things might not be there evident right now is because ultimately you need to be monetizing something and paying those platforms back for it, right? Because whoever is even aggregating आपका content and आगे जाके वो जो चढ़ा रहे हैं उनकी भी तो उसमें effort लगती है, right? And to maintain relationships and so on and so forth. So I'm not surprised that there are aggregators out there that are not putting their content on Petari. But that's primarily because maybe the model at the time at which it was launched was a little bit early for Pakistan, but also just having Pakistani content might not be enough to get people to pay in the country. So that's why if Petari was, let's say, gobbled up by an international player like Spotify, it would make a lot of sense for them because they would get a lot of Pakistani content and they can monetize on their overall platform through the Pakistani market. But for Petari by itself to do that, I think it's difficult.
Okay. Let's look at some of your other investments from Sarmayacar's end. So you got music streaming service out of Lahore ho gaya, that's followed by in Procheck, a company that ensures integrity of service. What does Procheck do?
Yeah.
And how much also I had another question so you're an investor.
Yeah.
You're not part of the process of making the company function and all the day-to-day?
No, so normally we're on the boards of these companies. So
okay.
Of most of our all of our frankly first fund investments, we are on the board of directors. So what we would have are some kind of rights as part of being on the board and some responsibilities to ensure governance is put in place. Normally, even the hiring of a CEO and stuff is subject to determination by the board. But we are not what are called executives of the company. So we are not responsible for day-to-day building. We're not responsible for day-to-day hiring. where they need to be allocating some of their budget. We, of course, are leveraged by some of these founders and CEOs. For example, agar aapne ek C-suite कोई individual hire करना है, so they would normally request us to interview them and to provide some view. We would normally be setting their compensation levels and so on. But idea is that we don't know how to build those businesses better than those people. And once we have made a determination that this is an interesting space that we want to be in and structured around it, then we let them build those companies and then work on a pull factor basis कि जहाँ पे आपको help चाहिए, let us know, pull us in, and then we will provide that help. Obviously, this also varies company to company because the capability of every founder or every CEO is also different. So in some areas where they might not have the financial background or understanding around how to fundraise, but they might be very, very good at building the product, we will try to provide them that help there. In other areas where they need, for example, marketing support, but we don't know how to do effective marketing, we might then go out and get some people that can help them with it. So it's really becoming it's kind of like a marriage, you're getting in there for a long period. And the only outcome that works for everyone is that the company actually becomes big and valuable. And once that position is sold or the company is exited, then the founders make money, we make money, and then we can recycle some of that cash to other new opportunities as well. So that alignment of incentives is one of the key elements that we provide at the very beginning. And the way to ensure that is mostly through board representation.
Okay, and what about Procheck?
So Procheck उस वक्त thesis ये था कि जी आपकी पाकिस्तान के अंदर एक fake medicine का काफ़ी problem है. Accordingly 30%, approximately 1/3 of the medicine that's available in Pakistan is counterfeit. Right? क्योंकि आपके measure होते हैं. So what the original thesis around Procheck was, ये आपकी मेडिसिन के पैक्स के ऊपर छोटे से कोड्स लगाते थे. और वो कोड से आप वेरीफाई कर सकते थे बैच और कहाँ पे ये बना, इसकी एक्सपायरेशन क्या है और क्या नहीं. द रीज़न वी लाइक दैट मॉडल एट दैट टाइम वाज कि एक रेगुलेशन की बात हो रही थी पीछे कि जी ये गवर्नमेंट इन्फोर्स्ड एक रेगुलेटर है पाकिस्तान का, ड्रैप के नाम से, ड्रग रेगुलेटरी अथॉरिटी ऑफ पाकिस्तान, कि वो मैंडेट करेंगे फॉर एवरी फार्मास्यूटिकल मैन्युफैक्चरर इन द कंट्री कि वो उनकी मेडिसिन के ऊपर वो सारा एक लेबल लगाओ. So Procheck was the company that would apply those labels, and through their platform and the software offering, you could check the validity of each of these medicine and find out more information. That business model didn't work because वो regulation आपकी delay होती गई. Delay क्यों होती गई? क्योंकि manufacturers जो थे वो कहते हैं जी ये extra cost हम क्यों bear करें, क्योंकि आपने prices आपने fix की हुई हैं और cost आप हमारे ऊपर बढ़ाते जाते हैं. तो वो delay होती क्या हुआ कि जी वो उस startup का survival viable now hota agar if you were chasing the same opportunity.
The government sets the prices for the pharmaceuticals?
Yeah, so in Pakistan it's a regulated market, price controlled market. और आपके फिर margins control वो back solve होते हैं उससे. 15% आपका retail का margin होता है जो आपकी normal pharmacy पे आप जाते हैं. But the RRP is set for each medicine kind of category by the government, and then you work backwards कि जी manufacturer को कितना आ रहा है और सारा.
And how do they justify this mandate? Shouldn't it be non-regulated and private?
That's a call जो कि different jurisdictions में different calls होती हैं. Ultimately, unfortunately I have a capitalist in my job description, literally. So ये market को चीज़ें determine करनी चाहिए because the government or the regulators cannot get that balance right. अभी आप for example देखें manufacturers are having to deal with these escalating costs. जो inflation इतनी ज़्यादा हुई है पाकिस्तान में, आपकी inputs भी जो बाहर से आ रही हैं, ज़्यादातर बाहर से आती हैं, वो आपकी डॉलर इंडेक्स प्राइसेस हैं, कॉस्ट आपकी बढ़ती जा रही है और आपको बेचनी वो चीज़ उसी तरह ही है. इसी वजह से आपके डिमांड सप्लाई के बहुत बड़े इम्बैलेंसेस रहते हैं पाकिस्तान में, इसीलिए आपकी यहाँ पे शॉर्टेजेस होती हैं. इसीलिए आपकी एक ग्रे मार्केट इसके अराउंड बन चुकी हुई है जहाँ पे आपकी होर्डिंग होती है around different medicines and so on and so forth. So a lot of those issues stem from actually applying a certain regulation, which frankly, in my opinion, doesn't work in a place like Pakistan. But yes, that's the case over here.
I mean, the ugly side of it would be like the American side where they advertise drugs and as if they'll cure everything. Unke commercials aise aa rahe hote hain jaise aap ye drug, and they don't even show them consuming the drug, but they show someone who's happy, traveling, adventurous, and all of a sudden some M2 drug for some heart disease thing comes up. And when I was in America, I was shocked that that's actually a possibility as well. But the corporate interest of big pharma could be something that can be used in marketing to kind of get people on drugs that they really don't necessarily need as well, I suppose. Is that the dark side of that capitalistic model?
I think there is, right? Like, and I think there was this individual, I'm forgetting his name, who used to be called Pharma Bro, who would wait for some of these drugs to come off their, like, the patents that they have, or like the protection that they had. And then the next day, the price of that specific drug would increase by, like, 1,500%, right? Because it was no longer under that protection, which kind of like, controlled the pricing and so on. So you can have effects like this, right? Because again, it's an open free market, and you could have, like, pharma companies, आप कितने लोगों के लिए income generation opportunities create कर रहे हैं, which is a proxy for, like, jobs आपने कितनी create की हैं, right? Like, but in this new economy, in the gig economy, a job is effectively someone who has an opportunity to do a small gig and make a couple of bucks and so on. And that has been facilitated a lot by companies like Bykea. So that's why, like, that's all obviously close to my heart. It's also doing really well. Ek wo hai, we can also talk about, for example, ek ABHI naam ki ek like company which does earned wage access. What that means is कि जी आपके मुल्क में
trying to decode that
कि जी आपने अगर 20 दिन काम किया है एक महीने के अंदर, but you still have to wait till the end of the month to get paid, even for those 20 days of work.
Okay.
So what ABHI does is it allows you to draw up to a percentage of the salary that you have already earned because you've already worked for 20 days.
Okay.
And why is this interesting in Pakistan? Is because यहाँ पे आपकी lending इतनी नहीं होती individuals के लिए. आपकी एक बड़ी फैक्ट्री है और अगर आप उसमें एक काम करने वाले हो तो और आपके घर में अगर शादी हो रही है एक, तो आप उस महीने जाके अपने एम्प्लॉयर से कहोगे कि सर आज मुझे इस महीने ना थोड़ा सा एडवांस दे दें, वो मेरी आप तनख्वाह से कटवा लेना, राइट? अब वो इनफॉर्मली ये चीज़ हो रही थी. What this company does is it formalizes all of that. वो जाके क्या कहते हैं कि जी हमने एंग्रो के साथ जाके हमने कॉन्ट्रैक्ट कर लिए. एंग्रो के जो एम्प्लॉयज़ हैं, they have the facility to withdraw up to whatever they have earned, up to a percentage of that, और महीने के एंड में एंग्रो डायरेक्टली पेरोल से काट के कंपनी को वापस रीपे कर देगा. अब ये क्यों इंटरेस्टिंग है? क्योंकि ये लोग उसके ऊपर इंटरेस्ट रेट नहीं चार्ज करते. सो दिस इज नॉट लाइक अ पे डे लोन कि जी आपने वो लिया और आप फिर वापस करोगे तो फिर उसके बाद वो कवर ऑफ हो जाएगा. अगर आपने नहीं किया तो वो इंटरेस्ट से बढ़ता जा रहा है. So that makes it, they charge a fee, a flat fee around, like, each transaction that you do. But this makes it A, Sharia compliant, and B, in a country which is ravaged by inflation right now, 15 days can also make a difference.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so to have a proposition like that in a country like Pakistan became, like, very appealing. So when this opportunity came around, for us, this was perhaps the only investment that we made before the product had been rolled out even. But it's been one of our best performing investments. The company has gone on to go do, like, other things that they now lend to businesses as well.
And these are one of your later investments?
This is one of the more recent investments.
So, you know how there's that saying, if you want to succeed, fail fast, and all startup entrepreneurs tend to say that your first 2 startups are going to fail. So you had how many of these failures before the success of the Bykea thing, and this Apna is what you're calling it?
ABHI Finance ke naam se.
ABHI Finance. This is fintech.
This is fintech, exactly. So thankfully, luckily for us, we have, from our first fund, we've done 15 core investments, and then we've done, like, some which are very early stage, through a different program. Of the core investments, so far, touch wood, all are surviving.
Thank you, God.
But not everyone has had the same level of traction or what we would describe as success.
Okay.
In reality, for an investor, particularly for a venture investor, success should only be determined once we've started receiving returns. Meaning we have either sold a position or we start getting dividends. So कि जी जो हमने पैसे invest किए हुए हैं उनमें से कुछ वापस भी आ रहा है या नहीं. वो alhamdulillah, yesterday was the first time that one of our highly profitable companies announced a dividend, which will be the first dividend, we believe, in the entire venture industry out of Pakistan. That is actually going to go back and to our investors as well and come back to a venture capital dedicated fund.
Is this Bykea?
No, so this is not Bykea. This is actually one of the early investments, जो कि Publish-X के नाम से है, but their product called SIMPAISA.
Oh, SIMPAISA, yes.
And theirs was a very interesting proposition क्योंकि यहाँ पे आपको एक काफ़ी मुश्किल होता है to monetize and monetize customers locally, particularly when you're offering something digitally. Right?
Okay.
आप एक दुकान में जब होते हो तो तब कैश की ट्रांजैक्शन करना तो is आसान. The founders of SIMPAISA had another streaming platform, a video streaming platform by the name of TapMad. When they came up with that, they saw like customers were coming, like they were getting consumers, but they didn't know how to charge them. और उस वक्त आपके पास बहुत लिमिटेड एवेन्यूज थे. एक डायरेक्ट कैरियर बिलिंग के नाम से, DCB के नाम से एक सर्विस होती है जो आप अपना क्रेडिट का जो मोबाइल का क्रेडिट होता है उसमें से आप डिडक्शन करवा के पे कर सकते हैं. That model is not very efficient because आपके telcos take a very big chunk out of that. So the merchant जो सर्विस वो प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं उनको कट के बहुत कम मिलते हैं, 55 to 60% आपको मिलता था. So these founders basically went out and founded this new company called SIMPAISA, जहाँ पे वो क्या कहते थे कि जी आपको उसका पे करने के लिए इन ऐप आपको options मिलेंगी like direct carrier billing, but also over time credit cards, direct integration with EasyPaisa, Jazz Cash, and so on. So they made that product, and this is 2019 was when we invested in them, late 2018 actually. And during COVID, they got tremendous traction because they were able to specialize around Apple Store के और Google Play Store के international merchants जो कि पाकिस्तान में monetize करना चाह रहे थे, क्योंकि उनके पास पहले यहाँ पे monetization के avenues नहीं थे. ये हैं आपकी गेमिंग कंपनीज, आपकी स्ट्रीमिंग कंपनीज जिनके इन ऐप के अंदर आप 5 रुपए का कुछ खरीद रहे हैं, 10 रुपए का कुछ खरीद रहे हैं. बट इट्स सो सीमलेस बिकॉज यू डोंट हैव टू गो टू अ डिफरेंट ऐप, यू जस्ट प्लेइंग दैट गेम. एंड बिकॉज द गेम हैज इंटीग्रेटेड विद SIMPAISA, they charge a very small percentage, between 3-4%, which in a country like Pakistan is not actually that high for processing payments.
And the absence of any other thing available.
Exactly. So now they have raised hardly any capital in our world, a total of $200,000, which in today's world is unthinkable कि आप पूरी company उतने से capital में बना दें. But inshallah, their net profit after everything should be in millions of dollars. So we just have hopefully our first dividend coming from them. But that also signifies the type of opportunity जो कि पाकिस्तान में, because of scarcity of such solutions, can create, even in a niche, you can generate value. You can then create that value and capture it in a structured form. And everyone who's taken that risk along the journey can get paid off. Even in that scenario, like in every other situation, we're only minority small investors in these platforms. The bulk of the ownership remains with these founders. And so when these things work, they are the ones who really generate.
और इस कंपनी की IPO अभी नहीं हुई होगी?
अभी नहीं हुई है. But I think of the various companies that we have in our portfolio, they would be a leading contender eventually to potentially IPO in, because IPO markets can
would it be interested, because it would dilute your share, right? So how does that work?
No, but we also want to exit our position at some point, right? So if we entered in end 2018, so far we've already been invested for 4 years, 2-3 साल शायद हम और invested रहे, but eventually our model also requires that we need to sell these businesses and make a return so that we can get paid ourselves and also share those returns with the investors that have backed funds like Sarmayacar.
So if you had like a big massive chunk of an investment in a company, let's say $200,000 and the company is worth $400,000. If you pull out your $200,000, I'm sorry to borrow sexual slang of a 16-year-old, if you were to pull out at that point, that would mean massive downsizing and the ruination upon the company. But if it was big enough and it could take that shock, you could pull out and have a... How does that work?
So there's difference. There's a difference between, and this is going to get slightly technical, there's a difference between primary capital and secondary capital, right? Primary capital means that the money is going into the business.
Okay.
एक बार हमने, let's say $2 lakh अगर हमने invest कर दिए, we can't just pull it out. We can't just tell the company, oh, give it back to us. जब हम वो 4 लाख वाली position में आके, when we're selling it to our position to another investor who's paying us to buy our shares. It doesn't mean that the company is paying it back. So there's that distinction. So if we were to sell, let's say when it was worth 400,000, technically it shouldn't make any difference to the business itself. But there is obviously some disruption, right? आपके नए shareholders आ रहे हैं, they will want, their own rights. You need to, take them along that journey. And the question is, why would they want that to happen if it's going to cause disruption without them benefiting? So normally, leading up to that exit, you normally would have mostly primary injection, yani capital going into the business. Maybe in some cases you can have small secondary percentages that are also sold by either existing investors or in some cases also by founders. For example, एक founder जो कि उस तरह के economic means से नहीं शुरू किया उसने, उसके पहले से नहीं जायदादें थी, and they go on this journey of building a company and they've done a good job. अब उनको at some point they want some liquidity as well, right? क्योंकि शुरू में जब आप स्टार्टअप शुरू कर रहे होते हो आपकी इतनी ज़्यादा सैलरीज भी नहीं होती, you're trying to make ends meet with whatever funding that you have available. But at some point they want to also buy a car, they want to have like, you know, if they have children, they want to send them to good schools and so on. So it's not unreasonable to imagine that along that journey, some of the founders will sell like a small portion of their stake as well. But the idea around incentive alignment is कि अगर आपके स्टार्टअप के लिए हमने रिस्क लेके इन्वेस्ट किया है, तो we want you to be building that investment. And once that investment goes to a certain scale and the company gets sold, you're going to make the most money still. But in the interim, अगर आपने पहले से ही पैसे निकाल लिए हैं, आपने गाड़ियाँ ले ली हैं, जायदादें बना ली हैं, you're not going to be motivated to continue to work there. And then obviously then that incentives are, in that case, incentives are misaligned. So we try to avoid that through like, you know, the rights that we typically look for.
Where is the food delivery model by Uber for Foods, I guess is what they would say. Where's the problem in that model? Where do you see the problem?
So just to be clear, I think the food delivery model, like the prepared food delivery model, can still work. And Food Panda is a long way towards that. In fact, I would say that perhaps if they're not already breaking even, they might be very close to it. I think just the standard quick commerce delivery model, I think, is a little bit more challenged because the economics are very different. Economics, आपके जो Food Panda के हैं, वहाँ पे ज़्यादातर restaurants are complaining because 20, 25, 30% of the total order value is charged by Food Panda from those restaurants. The margins in a quick commerce delivery model are not that. They're like mid-single digit margins, right? क्योंकि आप उन manufacturers को जाके आप super crisp बनाने वालों को ये नहीं कह रहे कि आप हमें 30% आप हमें दे दें just because we're a distribution platform जहाँ से orders होते हैं और हम लोगों को पहुँचा रहे हैं. So that's the slight distinction. Why do, like, you know, some of these models work and some don't? Ultimately,
Amazon's the same thing, isn't it?
Right. So Amazon ne kya kiya? Amazon also takes the cut, right? And what they did was they said that every subscale manufacturer of a product that is selling on the platform is not as efficient in...
What does subscale mean?
Subscale meaning कि जी मतलब आप aggregate करके जब सारों का scale लें on of every manufacturer that is selling their products on Amazon, that aggregated scale is much bigger. So meaning कि जी अगर आपको warehouse एक बनाना है तो वहाँ पे आपके 100 manufacturers की चीज़ें जा रही हों बनिस्बत एक के जा रही हों तो वो the economics will always be different. So why did the mom and pop shops not survive? Was because their logistics, in a world where people were moving their purchases online, they could not match Amazon's fulfillment effectively, the logistics element of it, etc. And the similar thing applies like, you know, in Pakistan as well. पर उसकी economics क्या है कि जी आपने एक item है जो कि किसी ने online खरीदा है, वो एक पहले एक जगह जाके पैक होगा, वो पैक होके वो फिर कहीं warehouse जाएगा, warehouse से जाके वो last mile delivery वाले के पास जाएगा, and then eventually it's going to reach the customer. Now, if Amazon is, let's say, delivering that in one particular area for 100 people versus that one order being made to one manufacturer and one delivery person coming there, the economics of those are very different. और इस सारी चीज़ को हम एक layman term कह लें जो भी, इनको हम इकट्ठे करके unit economics बोलते हैं कि for per unit of the product that is being consumed or ordered or delivered, what are the economics tied to that? और वो वहाँ पे आके आपका scale का एक difference आ जाता है. When I was sharing the example of some of the quick commerce businesses in Pakistan, the problem that arose was कि आपके because of the delivery SLAs that were promised, like meaning delivering within 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, उसके अंदर उस SLA को meet करने के लिए you needed to have what are called dark stores in very close radius. Because वरना आपकी वो pick करके pack करके delivery within that time period is difficult. What also had to happen was in Pakistan around these types of products, FMCG products, It's a full inventory purchase model, meaning you need to have already purchased that inventory. It needed to be sitting in your warehouse. There had to be an idle person there who with an idle vehicle, and you couldn't stack up these deliveries because there wasn't enough order density from each dark store के nearby areas. So what that meant was कि जो आपको margin मिल रहा है वो बहुत कम मिल रहा है. Now it could have still worked if we had moved our monthly purchases of our groceries to these online platforms. So meaning कि अगर आपके instead of having 1200-1500 का एक order, अगर आपका 15,000 या 20,000 के order deliver हो रहा है तो उसके अंदर there was enough margin for the platform to cover its cost. और वो cost आपकी क्यों cover करनी है? Because आपका obviously एक service provide कर रहे हैं. And you need to have you need to develop the technology, you need to have that आपका एक fulfillment center कह लें या आप वो dark store कह लें, उसको fit out करना है, आपको वो vehicles चाहिए. Even if they're not purchased, all of these things have a certain cost attached to them. So you needed to be delivering so many such orders every hour that the economics and the salary or the whatever you're paying for that individual plus the economics of that dark store had to be covered by this large number of orders that were coming through. We as a country in Pakistan maybe are not at that point yet, and there's various different factors we can discuss कि जी हमने monthly groceries क्यों नहीं move की. क्योंकि ज़्यादातर यहाँ पे आपका जो मेट्रो का एक को चक्कर लगता है वो दैट्स एन आउटिंग फॉर अ फैमिली, एवरेज फैमिली इन पाकिस्तान. वो बच्चे आपके वो ट्रॉली में भी खेल रहे हैं, it's
not thought of as a chore.
Yeah, it's not thought of as a chore. और जहाँ पे वो चोर आप समझते हैं वहाँ पे हर 5 मिनट दूर आपकी एक कोई कॉर्नर स्टोर है, कोई किराना स्टोर है, और आपके घर में अगर कोई डोमेस्टिक हेल्पर है तो वो आप जाके जो टेल आइटम्स जो ख़त्म होते हैं वो आप फ़ौरन से जाके उनसे मंगवाते हैं, राइट? सो बोथ ऑफ दोज थिंग्स टुगेदर विद the uptake of this offering in Pakistan was not quick enough to offset that. उसको जल्दी करने के लिए उन्होंने क्या किया? उन्होंने डिस्काउंट्स देना शुरू कर दिए कि जी आप अगर ऑनलाइन आके करेंगे तो आपको 5% ऑफ इससे, 10% ऑफ उससे while you can get some demand, the unit economics are hurting there. और वेंचर के अंदर assumption ये होती है कि शुरू में अगर आपने कस्टमर्स को एक्वायर करने के लिए अगर यूनिट
इकोनॉमिक्स Who bears the cost of that discount? Is it the person who's selling the thing or is it like the Amazon?
No, because man super crisp वाले कहेंगे हम क्यों कम का बेचें?
हम क्यों कम का? Exactly. So your company that's delivering is Amazon would have to absorb that.
Exactly, which in turn is absorbed by the VCs that fund these businesses. Because that's the experimentation you're doing around a particular model, and if it takes shape, वो hypothesis क्या होता है कि जी eventually once they are scaled and they're the only players in town, so they can set their own prices. जो कि अब Amazon उस position पे पहुंच गया है and they can then dictate their terms. इसी चीज़ का मैं एक different आपको example देता हूँ, which we all experience. Uber Kareem, and maybe this might be a good segue into Bykea as well. When Uber Kareem launched, and I think 2016 was the first year when they were kind of taking off. 2016, 2017 में मैंने खुद बहुत ज़्यादा ऊबर करीम यूज़ की क्योंकि आपकी वो राइड्स इतनी सस्ती थी. अब वो राइड्स क्यों सस्ती हैं? क्योंकि वहाँ से आपने डिमांड इंसेंटिवाइजेशन की हुई है कि जी आपको सब्सिडी दे के start using this, start getting used to the fact that in a place where mass transit is not available, mass transport is not available, these offer a solution to plug a gap. पर Uber Kareem जैसे models के अंदर, unless you have supply of those cars or those captains, it makes no sense, right? Because अगर आप एक ऐप खोलोगे और आपको बताएगा कि जी 52 मिनट्स बाद आपको एक बंदा जो अंदरून लाहौर के अंदर भी बैठा हुआ है वो आके आपको उठा के कहीं ले जाएगा, you're not going to use it. So at the beginning, in order to incentivize supply, you give them guarantees, bonuses. आप उन्हें कहते हो कि जी आप बस प्लेटफॉर्म के ऊपर आप रहें तो आपको इतना पे आउट होगा. At the beginning, I'm sure you also remember, owners were going and buying cars so that they would put their drivers on the thing, right? Like, जी आपको owner का separate bonus है, driver का separate bonus है, and so on. So why was that working? Was because आपकी demand side के ऊपर भी incentivization होगी, supply side के ऊपर भी होगी. Supply आप ले आए, people were finding that these were cheap enough rides, so they were taking them, right? और आपकी काफ़ी एक market उस time build up होगी. At one point, at their peak, the combined, they were doing close to 1 million bookings a day.
Wow.
Right? At the peak day that they had in Pakistan.
Wow.
Between Uber and Kareem combined. अब जब वो नॉर्मलाइज हुई हैं प्राइसेस, आई एम श्योर आई कांट डिस्क्लोज दिस टू ओपनली, बट दे आर लाइक कंबाइंड लेस देन 50,000.
Right?
Combined less than 50,000 because that's actually जो fair price के ऊपर जो market है आपकी, वो इतनी ही है अभी. आपकी capacity यहाँ पे नहीं है. आपकी अब average ride अगर 400-500 रुपए की भी है, the average Pakistani cannot afford that. Right? और वो क्यों इतनी price होनी ज़रूरी है? क्योंकि आपका जो asset use हो रहा है उस चीज़ की सर्विस डिलीवरी के लिए, उसकी कोई ना कोई मिनिमम यील्ड तो आपको बनानी है. अदरवाइज व्हाई वुड अ पर्सन स्टे ऑन दैट प्लेटफॉर्म? जिसने 10 लाख की 12 लाख की सबसे सस्ती गाड़ी ली है, दे नीड टू मेक सम मनी टू बी एबल टू कवर द कॉस्ट ऑफ इट. दिस इज वेयर बाइकिया कम्स इन. बाइकिया को क्यों ट्रैक्शन मिली? कि उन्होंने कहा वही मॉडल हम मोटर बाइक्स पे यूज़ करते हैं. मोटर बाइक्स पे क्यों यूज़ करते हैं? क्योंकि एक तो 22 मिलियन से ज़्यादा मोटर बाइक है पाकिस्तान में, और कोई 3-3.25 मिलियन गाड़ियाँ. तो यानी सप्लाई की अवेलेबिलिटी काफ़ी आराम से हो सकती है. दूसरी चीज़ ये हुई कि जी आपके एवरेज यूज्ड मोटर बाइक आपकी $150 की है. द चीपेस्ट यूज्ड कार इज़ $5,000. और आपका जो फेयर आपका डिफरेंस था शुरू में, वो $1 के करीब था बाइकिया की राइड, और आपकी कोई $2.5-3 था आपकी ऊबर करीम की गाड़ी वाली राइड. तो अब आपका डिफरेंस इज मे बी 3 times ऑन द एक्चुअल फेयर चार्ज. द कॉस्ट ऑफ द एसेट आपका डिफरेंस इज 20-30 times, right, in terms of like equivalent use. So the yield dynamic was such that it made a lot more sense for people to come on a platform like Bykea. But उसके अंदर आपके different challenges आ जाते हैं. एक बाइक आप 12 घंटे नहीं चला सकते, जो कि आप एक गाड़ी शायद 12 घंटे करके चला सकें. एक बाइक के ऊपर सिर्फ एक इंसान पीछे बैठ सकता है. गाड़ी के अंदर आपके 2-3 लोग बैठ जाते हैं. 3 लोग बैठ जाते हैं. लगेज भी आ जाता है. भी जा सकते हैं. Right? So there's always going to be a market that can be covered by like those cars. But the economic reality of the country is such that कि आपकी mass market, अगर आप इसको खास तौर पे एक mass transit का alternative अगर आप दे रहे हैं, तो वो आपकी इस टाइप की अपॉर्चुनिटी के अंदर विद द इकोनॉमिक्स अवेलेबल बिकम्स क्वाइट डिफिकल्ट. और बाइकिया ने क्या किया कि उन्होंने ये कहा कि अच्छा, आप अगर पूरा दिन भी नहीं चलाना चाहते, आपको हम बोनस नहीं देना चाह रहे ज़्यादा, पर ये कह रहे हैं कि आप अपने जब काम पे जा रहे हैं सुबह, और वो जो आपके घंटे की जो राइड है उसमें आप किसी को साथ लेते जाएं, जब वापस आ रहे हैं उसमें आप साथ वापस लाते जाएं, शायद आपके पेट्रोल की कीमत, शायद आपके उस दिन के खाने की कीमत उसमें से निकल जाए.
InDrive even does something similar with these offers that they put up.
Yeah, so InDrive is the new entrant which has really disrupted, like from the started with disrupting the car wali side, but अब now they're also on the bike side. उन्होंने जाके एक different model उन्होंने किया. उन्होंने कहा कि instead of giving like high bonuses to these supplier जो हम ला रहे हैं, हम उनको commission नहीं charge करेंगे. Because ultimately these platforms make their money from the commission they charge from these drivers or captains or riders, whatever you want to call them. तो उनका एक थोड़ा सा different model.
So how do they make money then?
So that's the point. At the beginning, they're absorbing some of that loss because they want to capture that market. और वो capture किस तरह करें? वो supply अगर आपके पास आ जाएगी और ऊबर करीम के पास इतनी नहीं रहेगी, तो then you can then say कि अब supply आपके पास ही है सारी, तो आप फिर 5% commission फिर आप 10% से commission.
But that's the same thing that happened with Kareem, where it went from 1 million that you were saying into now 50,000, which is half even, right?
Yeah.
So
अब उसके अंदर
less than
क्या
half,
क्या
1/10.
एक और चीज़ जो उन्होंने different की, उन्होंने कहा कि instead of the platform dictating what the price should be, the consumer can pick what they want to pay for a journey from A to B. So what in InDrive consumer अपनी कीमत डालता है, वो फिर अपने broadcast होती है of the drivers that are nearby, and then a driver picks it up and can also negotiate directly
that thing, yeah.
Right? अब उसके ultimate aim क्या है कि आपके ड्राइवर के पास ज़्यादा पैसे आने चाहिए. That's how these platforms work. कि जितनी ज़्यादा पैसे उसकी जेब में आएंगे, उतना ज़्यादा उसकी propensity होगी to stay on that platform, उतने ही कम आपके वेट टाइम्स होंगे, जितने कम वेट टाइम्स होंगे उतनी डिमांड को आपकी सर्विस बेहतर लगेगी और वो वापस उसी तरह आते रहेंगे. So all of this at the beginning needs to be subsidized through money that is raised through venture capital. So these types of risks, elevated risks, are what are a key part of the kind of opportunities that we looked at. और वो हमें फिर देखना होता है कि यार ये कब तक sustain करना पड़ेगा such loss making. so that eventually they can become profitable. And a lot of times, not just us, like globally, VCs have gotten it wrong as well. Right? Like, for example, last year, I think tens of billions of dollars were poured into just this experiment around quick commerce. वो पाकिस्तान के अंदर तो एक दो चीज़ें जो highlight हुई कम startups के unfortunate failure is not an exception. All over the world last year, tens of billions of dollars just went into this quick commerce की वो opportunity. A lot of those companies are no longer there or are looking for another home or are looking to merge because आपके वो जो unit economics just didn't make sense.
Okay.
Right? And I think that's the assessment we as VCs have to do at an early stage कि ये model evolve करके scale करके कहाँ पे पहुँच सकता है, and whether there's a market for there, whether people are going to be willing to pay a certain price to use this product or service.
Well, you said that you're a capitalist, and as we were talking about that Amazon example, मेरे दिमाग में I've just read this book called The Warehouse. Is on computer लगाते हैं एक second के लिए. So it's this book that projects this post-apocalyptic kind of a future.
Oh, nice.
And it's a wonderful book. And uske andar mom and pop stores and individual. It's a book I wanna give the shout out to whoever wrote it, by Rob Hart. What they showed was there's this guy. He's an inventor, and he invented this little shell that gets wrapped around an egg, and you put that egg into a microwave and it boils it perfectly. And that was his invention. And I was assuming that the writer must have read and researched this problem, because what he was saying was that individual inventors are dying now because that invention was put on 15% discount, and the inventor had to bear the shock of that. And slowly it didn't make any sense for him to sell that thing on the warehouse, and the warehouse ended up absorbing, like, the mom and pop stores become a part of the warehouse, and this great monolith is created that ends up monitoring people, like we find out in Amazon ke warehouses that they've got a timer running. So if you're not active, and तो labor rights or unions के कितने violations होती हैं वहाँ पे. Do you see like all of these like capitalistic entities going to this post-apocalyptic kind of a place where, like there's Big Brother watching, there's a totalitarian corporate interest that is dictating the lives of human beings, if not so already, because we are kind of manipulated by corporate interests in marketing and PR ways anyways. Do you see any of that like coming out of this halchal jo hamari hai insaan ki, of finding progress and doing quick commerce and all of these things and consumptive sort of, do you see any of that?
To be honest, as much as I would not want that outcome, I think there is going to be certainly an element of it. एक तो थोड़ी सी हमारी instant gratification के around जो addiction है, right? That gets fueled, or like या वो जो hit आपको मिलती है through these kind of like avenues. I think there will always be like niches where like that specialization or that personalization element is always going to be there. There are always going to be some services, for example, that we would not want to be provided by like, giant organizations, etc. But when it comes to standardized stuff, right, we're all going to lean towards that. For example, agar aap Galaxy phone le rahe hain Samsung ka, it's going to be the same phone whether you buy it in person, from an individual mom and pop shop, or you order it on a giant online platform. If a person places enough value on that experience of that purchase, then they might continue to go there. But by and large, being rational economic animals, which we need to assume humans are, you would naturally gravitate towards what is like, the least leakage, from an economic term as well, right? Like so while I don't want to like kind of imagine such a world, and I don't think it's happening in our lifetimes, but I think eventually this is in a way like Adam Smith said, right? Like specialization element and so on. I think it will move to that. What kind of like prevents it from happening, or maybe some conscience within these like large organizations, hopefully like some realization that humans are different to like robots, and ultimately you need to cater to like different elements of humans rather than just oiling a machine on the other hand. But unfortunately, I can't say that, okay, we're moving in that direction more so than like the direction that you pointed out, which is like, actually organizations becoming larger, using AI, machine learning to know what your patterns are, what your consumption kind of like, is going to be around, and then putting that right in front of you. For a human to do that is just more difficult, right? Because then the processing ability is a little bit difficult. Yes, you can make judgment calls and everything, but like, to just take plain data that of your own consumption or your own history, and then coming up with a proposition that appeals to you, I think machines are going to do that better. And that's why we're going to continue to move in that direction. As much as I wouldn't want to see that face of the world.
I mean, do you think that work's going to become optional for the human race anytime in our lifetime? Because there's that talk about universal basic income के एक पॉइंट आएगा जब काम करने की ज़रूरत किसी को भी नहीं होगी, तो इंसान का मकसद क्या रह जाएगा अगर काम नहीं करना तो. And like a lot of like these things also replace like previous jobs.
Yeah.
So how do you see that? That's like a necessary thing that has to happen.
I think आपकी innovation stifle हो जाती है इसी तरह. When you look at like some of the communist, socialist countries around the world, जहाँ पे अगर आपको पता है कि आपकी मेहनत के बाद भी आपको वही outcome मिलनी है, why would you work? Right? Like, so then you just want the base necessities. In fact, अगर आपने deter करना है किसी को from innovating, that's what you would do. And what is the American dream, right? Like American dream को क्या explain करते हैं कि जी, if you go there, you work hard, you're smart, you can achieve anything. Right, like if you go to like Cuba, and maybe right now is not the
you're an example of that dream.
Well,
I mean,
like in my case, like the whole like Pakistan angle was a very crucial part of like what I felt was like completing of the circle for me. I wanted that to happen, and that's why like I would have been okay, and I did like even give up some money which was like on an easier path for me abroad, because अपनाइत आपको और जगह पे नहीं मिलती है, आपको अपने मुल्क में मिलती है. And so like for me that was an important element of like my career, and I've been very lucky to have had those opportunities. पर अगर आप सारों को ये कहें कि आप जो मर्जी मेहनत करो, उसका आउटकम एक ही है. There's no difference between you being smart or not, you working hard or not. Then it will eventually lead to like just basically all mediocre outcomes, which effectively are going to like we would all have to live with. I don't think we're going to necessarily go there, because I think human ingenuity is something which carries a premium. I think human effort also carries a premium, and so like finding new opportunities, finding new avenues where people that previously have been maybe laid off is not the right word, but made defunct because like technology has taken over. I think our pockets emerge करती रहेंगी. This recent thing you might have heard of, like OpenAI, this platform called like ChatGPT, which basically you ask it a question and it pulls like AI pulls like information and data from all over the web, and it will give a response to you. I mean, the accuracy of some of those responses is mind-boggling, right? So the question becomes कि जी एक lawyer को आपको जो hire करना पड़ता है, and you ask that lawyer, can you prepare standard articles of association of a company, of a private company in Pakistan? If you go ask that question on ChatGPT, it's going to spit out something which is 90% what the lawyer would be doing, right? So the question is like, why would you engage a lawyer to do that? But the reason why a lawyer is required is because like every situation is also a little bit different. There are nuances around it. You might want some terms in there, etc., which it would take time to train one of these models to like accurately capture that for all the various different individuals that are using something of that sort. But we are going to continue to move more like gradually towards that world. And in that world, I think like again there are going to be different roles that like humans are playing. Not all of the roles are going to move to robots or be powered through AI. Simple examples: getting a haircut. Like a surgery, like these are types of like services that would be difficult for people to fully trust robots to do, even though technically you can prove that robots might be better at doing that.
They seem to be better at auto driving.
Exactly.
According to Tesla's statistics of people having accidents and doing things like they argue in the car, they get into They sleep, they fall asleep at the wheel. But the car doesn't. The car can stay up forever till the battery runs out. And if the battery is about to run out, it'll find a way to park itself on the side.
There you go.
But we can't trust it. I remember the first time I turned the autopilot thing on and started driving, it was a nerves thing. Like, डर लग रहा था कि क्यों चल रही है खुद अभी कुछ सामने से गाड़ी आ रही सामने से, and it avoids it. But like, you're afraid. But at some point you start trusting it when enough data goes into your brain about trusting that and validates it, right? So
yeah, वो कहते हैं ना, आपने कुछ देखा नहीं है तो आपको पता नहीं है कि क्या आउटकम होनी है, right? And none of us has that crystal ball. और आप एक उम्मीद या होप या एक बिलीफ के ऊपर ऑपरेट कर रहे होते हैं. I mean, all of religion is similar, right? Like, you know, कि आउटकम के बाद आके किसी ने फीडबैक नहीं दी कि हाँ यार अच्छा मरने के बाद ये होता है, उसके बाद यहाँ पे like, you know, these are the steps you follow. But that forms your belief. The same way, like, you know, belief in a system works, right? Like, you know, हम पाकिस्तान के अंदर भी हम पहले बात जिस तरह कर रहे थे कि जी यहाँ पे लोग कहते हैं कि जी वो कोई कमा के नहीं देता, लोग लाइक शॉर्टकट्स लेते हैं, वो क्यों लेते हैं? क्योंकि आपके अंदर जब बिलीफ नहीं है कि आपकी मेहनत आपको कोई चीज़ कोई बेनिफिट यील्ड करेगी, तो मेरा दिमाग ख़राब हो गया क्या मैं जाके मेहनत करूँ, right? Like, you know, why do I not want to sit around and just enjoy life and not work and, like, you know, everything still be taken care of? So you need to instill that kind of, like, you know, belief and confidence, and perhaps, like, you know, the way of bringing it around to, like, you know, the venture ecosystem, entrepreneurship is also just instilling that belief in the youth of a country that entrepreneurship can be a viable career choice. That was the biggest objective and the biggest hurdle, I would say, in starting what we started or what's happening right now in Pakistan. क्योंकि पहले आपकी एक बिलीफ थी फ्रॉम द पेरेंट्स जो इंस्टिल होती थी कि यार अच्छा अगर आप इंजीनियर बन जाओ या आप डॉक्टर बन जाओ ना तो आगे आपके पास ज़्यादा ऑप्शंस आएंगी, आप पैसे कमा सकोगे, आप अच्छी ज़िंदगी गुजार सकोगे एंड सो ऑन, क्योंकि उन्होंने देखा ही बहुत था. अब थोड़ी सी दुनिया डिफरेंट है एंड लाइक यू नो व्हाट आवर चिल्ड्रन आर गोइंग टू एक्सपीरियंस एंड व्हाट देयर चिल्ड्रन आर गोइंग टू एक्सपीरियंस इज गोइंग टू बी कम्प्लीटली डिफरेंट. और ये छोटी छोटी चीज़ों से शुरू होती है, जिस तरह मैंने पहले एग्जांपल दिया कि नाउ वेर मोबाइल फर्स्ट इकॉनमी. आपकी कॉमर्स भी मोबाइल फ़ोन पे हो रही है, आपके मीडिया कंजम्पशन भी मोबाइल फ़ोन पे हो रही है. Our parents came from a generation जहाँ पे TV तब इन्वेंट हुआ था, and for them that was the biggest kind of like, you know, revolutionary thing that happened. Henry Ford in 1904 or whatever, like, you know, the first Model T was coming around. He, in an interview, he said that if you had asked people what they really needed at that time, they would have said they need faster horses. Right? Yeah. And to think that that was replaced by a car, which right now seems like, who would have thought that was like, who would have said
still measured in horsepowers.
Still measured in horsepowers, but that was the reality at that time. So what is going to come in the next few years is going to, for us, look like completely unimaginable. But for the next generation, it might be like, you know, par for the course.
So what's next for Sarmayacar? Are you looking at new ventures, or are there any good ones on the horizon that you can talk about?
Yeah, so we are currently also engaged in a couple of like transactions. Like I mentioned, there's this streaming platform like on the video sort that we're looking to do something potentially where we combine Petari. We are also looking at the hospitality sector, where again in Pakistan, one of the theses is that as inflation is rising, like, you know, the exchange rate is where it is, people are going to stay more in the country, but the human urge to travel, to experience is going to remain there. So is there a model that we can move away from like आपने खुद hotel बना के उसको operate किया, like, you know, so we're looking at spaces like that. But at a higher level,
it's like Airbnb or something, or it's like Rumi's done something. I don't know if you've noticed that.
Yeah, so I don't know how you got that name, but I think you might hear something very soon in the news around Rumi and Sarmayacar.
Oh, interesting. They're doing a great job.
Yeah, so that's the idea, right? Like, you know, again, you have a proposition, you have a model which is asset light, and you're playing on a thesis which we think is going to increase demand over the next few years. So that's really like, you know, at the intersection of what we look at. But just taking a step back, for Sarmayacar overall, our first fund is almost coming to, like, you know, it's close. We've invested most of that. We are focused.
How much was it?
First fund was $25 million.
Okay.
We are now looking to monetize/exit some of those opportunities. And inshallah, like, you know, one or two of those exits are coming up. We've had one stock exit already. But we are in parallel, of course, also looking to now do our second fund, for which we're in the market, we're raising capital. And if I have one hope, because when I made the decision of coming back to Pakistan and setting up Sarmayacar, the idea was that this should be for the rest of my life. क्योंकि पाकिस्तान आके और सारी चीज़ यहाँ पे build करने की एक वो satisfaction तो अपनी जगह, but I also need to like hopefully be successful in what I'm doing, which is generating attractive returns, which hopefully haven't been generated in Pakistan before this time. So my hope is that like, I can continue to do this for the rest of my life, meet interesting entrepreneurs on a daily basis, come across like, innovative business models that seem ridiculous at the beginning, but are really going to transform Pakistan's economy, a lot of our industries and so on. And like, I was lucky to be the first, like, professional VC in Pakistan. I really want to be the last, like, meaning like, that you're still around when all dust has settled. So in that journey, I think we're only at the beginning. Literally, Pakistani venture ecosystem is like, what, 2-3 years old. In the US, it started in late 50s. And it's only picked up steam. We look across like India, Indonesia, Egypt, to use some of the more, call it comparable countries to us. They are further ahead, but we can leapfrog a lot of that. We can bring together like capital from all over the world and focus that attention on Pakistan. जो पहले नहीं थी इस तरह on the global radar. So that's really what we have as our objectives. More recently, we've just set up our Karachi presence as well, which like, is very important in like, as a city in Pakistan. So that's how we're building Sarmayacar, but hopefully like, many more chapters to write in there.
Amazing. And so people who would want to send you their pitches, what should they do?
So that's a great question, because one of the things that we as VCs are also looking for is how resourceful is a founder that is approaching us for funding. So some of the common known avenues are LinkedIn. We have a website where like our emails are mentioned, and there might be like talks that we're giving where at the end sometimes the information is shared. But the best founders are the ones that make warm connections through people that are either friends or whose opinion we trust, because those people will only recommend and refer people that they also value. And so it automatically goes to the second layer of filtration rather than just the top of the funnel. So a lot of the times that...
So I did the right thing today.
You did absolutely the right thing today. I would give them credit for figuring out this avenue of reaching out to us, right? Because what it does is that ultimately, like I think I shared earlier in the podcast that we've gone through like, what, 1,800 situations in Pakistan, of which only 15, 16 got investment.
Okay.
So the hit rate is very, very low. So we're also looking for some kind of evidence, some kind of signal that, oh, this particular opportunity makes sense, and we want to go. So most of the companies that are currently in our portfolio were referred by some other entrepreneur that we had backed from the fund already. Because that entrepreneur will know what type of opportunities we like, what is our style, what are we looking for at that beginning. So it starts already with like, better potential or probability of making a match compared to a completely cold call.
You have an international partner as well, right? तो वो मतलब वो जो पिच होती है वो आपके दिमाग और आपके सेंसेस में से गुजरती है, आपके जायजे में से गुजरती है, लेकिन फिर उसके बाद वो किसी और के जायजे में से भी गुजरती है या खाली आप ही फैसला कर रहे हो?
नहीं, so हमारा मॉडल क्या होता है? There's an investment committee in the fund, which is made up of myself and that international partner. So even no matter who has had the initial interaction, it will go through a process within the firm. So we will have like, we will look at commercial elements, financial elements, technology elements. And all of that, if it's interesting enough, will be compiled together in an investment memo, which then goes through our multiple stages. And then eventually, once we've done due diligence, and figured out what kind of a transaction construct can work in that situation, then it gets approved, and then we basically fund the company.
How long is this process like?
So for a company which is has its ducks in order, it can be as short as like 3 to 4 weeks. For companies that are completely coming fresh and they don't have like much in place, it can vary a little bit, because अगर तो वैसे ही कुछ नहीं है देखने को तो फिर तो हम जल्दी कॉल ले सकते हैं. पर अगर उन्होंने काम किया हुआ है, they're already in the market, but they just don't have a data room or like all the documentation and everything, all the numbers, the business plan ready. So then it can take like I would say like 6 to 10 weeks typically as well. A lot of times when there is competition amongst investors as well to invest, we have to also move quickly in some situations. पर एक मेरी जो बिलीफ है कि पाकिस्तान के अंदर ये कंपनीज आपकी एक दिन में बन नहीं रही, और अगर एक दिन के डिले से वो कंपनी बिल्कुल ही फॉल डाउन कर जाएगी, उसमें वैसे ही नहीं इन्वेस्ट करना. सो इफ देयर इज द राइट मीटिंग ऑफ माइंड्स एंड द प्रायोरिटीज आर राइट बिटवीन द इन्वेस्टर्स एंड द फाउंडर्स दैट आर लुकिंग टू रेज कैपिटल, so then we work according to what the time frame that is available to us.
Okay, Rabeel Warraich, man, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor. It's been very educational for me, and I hope बाकी सारों के लिए भी जो देख रहे हैं. और pitches तो मैंने भी 2 भेज दी हैं, और अब आप लोग भी, I'm sure people are always got ideas and plans and want to execute on something. So I'll attach like some emails or some sort of like contact details under in the description of the video. And thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was like, you know, my celebrity moment with you. So thank you so much for giving me time. And I just want to leave everyone with this message that, like, you know, again, we have so much potential in this country because kuch itna hua hi nahi hai yahan pe. And that's always the starting point of a place where to look to do something, rather than trying to like escape that. Find areas where सब कुछ खराब आपको लग रहा है, उसमें कुछ बनाएं और आके, like, you know, if you kill it, all of us are happy in that sense.